Hey Liliane, welcome to the podcast.
Hi, David. David, thanks for having me.
It's good. It's good. There is, as is ever the case, so much to unpack with what's going on in your world and with Exnaton, and of course your journey. We're going to do a lot of that, but perhaps you can start with a very first, sort of a helicopter view, if you like, of what Exnaton is all about.
Of course, that's my pleasure. At Exnaton, we support utilities in launching new energy products. And this way, we allow them to build those new products and to access flexibility of their customers.
Right. There's a lot in there, and this is a space that really interests me. I'll share more for why in a moment. But again, I do traditionally like to say that this is a podcast as much about tech as it is about people, or as much about people as it is about the tech. So I like to look at your journey, which is an interesting one. So from PhD student to a Forbes 30 under 30 leading entrepreneur. So perhaps you can share a little bit of how that all came about. What first got you into, firstly, the energy transition, and then specifically to start a company or co-found a company?
Yeah, my pleasure. Well, I studied business informatics and I always wanted to apply my skills in a sector where I can actually have an impact. So this is how it all started off. And then back at university, I discovered lots of energy classes and I thought, okay, this looks interesting. I want to understand more about this topic because I was never really interested in finance and insurances that much. And I had the feeling everything was all around those verticals. But then I discovered energy and it was super interesting. Um, a sector where you had to understand a lot, where you really had to dive in deeply. And I loved it. And I then did my first internships in the energy sector.
Okay.
And it all led to me going to ETH Zurich to do my PhD in the energy sector as well, but always also in the sector of technology, always applying my technical skills in the energy sector. And the energy sector has a huge potential for digitalization.
Yeah, yeah.
And this is how I ended up in doing my PhD and meeting my co-founders.
Right. So you met them also at that time of studying for the PhD.
I did. I met both of them at ETH Zurich. We were on the same research project. We all had kind of different backgrounds, but we were put together on that one research project and had the opportunity to build Switzerland's first energy community. And yeah, the project turned out quite nicely. After the project, the utility wanted to buy the software, and the end users that had tested the prototype wanted the software to be continuing, or the trading of electricity to be continuing. And this is when we decided to um, found the company and really kick this off with Exnaton.
That's really, again, I think what perhaps sometimes people don't realize, even though there are lots of factors, as you said there, that led towards the realization, actually, this is a good idea. People want to buy the product. There's something here, right? There's still a bit of a leap to get to that point of saying, well, there's something here. It says, hey, let's go found a company. So was there I don't know, a meal out or a drink at a bar or something that sort of got to the point of saying, hey, let's do this?
Yeah, there was quite a natural point because all three of us, we were done with our PhDs and we
Mm-hmm.
had to decide whether we now go out on the job market to look for jobs out there, or if this like very, very rough idea of our PhD research could be transformed into a real company that is generating real revenue. And this was basically the challenge because we came from a technical university. We had to reduce the complexity. We had to make it easy to understand for our target audience what we're actually doing and how we can help them. And for us, we had to calculate the business case. How are we going to be creating revenue from all of that? Is it a feasible business case? All of those questions were bugging us back then in 2020.
Feel that long ago, but I'm sure it does feel like long ago in some ways as well. But we'll dig into that. What I found really fascinating is that when my first got into the cleantech sector was in 2007. I co-founded a solar business in the UK, and two things struck me at that time. One of which is the incumbents, the DNOs in particular, but also the utilities were really, really entrenched in a monopoly that didn't really understand, or things were just how they'd always been, or certainly for many decades. But one of the things that sort of struck me quite early is when we were installing solar, it's primarily residential in the early days. And we were supplying a thing called a Sunny Boy, which was a little device which connected to the inverter, so you could see what you were generating, and you could see when you were exporting to the grid and all this kind of thing. And it dramatically changed the behaviors of the people, way beyond just the fact they've got solar on the roof and they felt good about themselves, especially with them when it was very expensive and the payback wasn't brilliant. But it changed the behaviors. They used to ring us and say, I'm using my washing machine, or I'm doing this, then the other, because it's a sunny day and I can see the energy generation. So it changed behaviors beyond the fact that they've just got this solar on the roof. And I think that transition from consumer to prosumer has been fascinating to see. And that seems to be, correct me if I'm wrong, but that seems to be the world in which you enable things to happen and to support that transition.
Definitely, definitely. So we empower utilities to launch a number of different rates of the new energy system. It can be a prosumer rate. It can be a rate for local energy sharing. It can be a dynamic market rate or a dynamic grid fee rate. So we or with these new rates, we make sure that renewables are being better integrated in the energy system, and we incentivize end users, whether it's households or businesses, to use their electricity in a more reasonable way, and to also we're motivating them to invest into solar, to invest into battery storage systems, because the more we optimize on a local level, the less we need to extend the grid infrastructure. So we really think very locally and try to optimize the household first, and then we try to optimize the local community, so the neighborhood, and then we optimize on the higher levels. And this is what we're enabling with our very, very fine granular billing of energy data and also visualization of the data, because at the end of the day, we want people to invest in new energy.
Yeah. I think that visualization piece, just to say, is really really important. Well, one thing that's the challenge is, so on one hand, you're looking at localization for obvious reasons of using and sort of integrating energies and using them locally as much as is possible. But utilities, by definition, even in the smaller ones, even in Switzerland, probably they're not small companies necessarily, and it's really tough as a startup to start to sell to these big organizations in your own country, let alone in international territories. So perhaps you can share how a little bit, clearly you had the advantage in Switzerland because of the project, but how did you then evolve that into working with other utilities and convincing them that this small little scrappy startup from Switzerland could enable them to better engage with their customers and sell more themselves?
Well, I mean, you're already saying that's quite the challenge, right? You're this tiny startup and you want to sell production software to a utility. I mean, the good thing is, from our perspective, is that the utilities, they need external support. I mean, of course, some of them are trying to build it in-house, but most of the utilities really need help from outside players. But then the question is, how are you positioning yourself in light of all the other players out there, in light of all the established players? I mean, one thing that is definitely helping us here is we're rather fast. We can really take care of our customers very nicely, and we can take their ideas up and put them into code sooner than many other more established companies out there, because they have very, very long roadmaps, and you as a customer, you have to fight for your ideas getting onto the roadmap. But here we have a value proposition, and we can really convert our customers' ideas rather quickly into production software.
I
And
think that's a unique. Sorry, go ahead.
um, you know, at the end of the day, it is really hard to sell into utilities, definitely. And you really have to see how are you getting into those large corporates? Who is your contact point? What countries are you tackling first? So yes, we started off in Switzerland, but then we realized there was a market need in Austria. So we rather or very soon went international, went into the neighboring country of Switzerland, and then sold energy community software to many utilities in Austria. And then from Austria, we realized there's a market need in Germany as well. So then we entered the German market, and you always need a first reference in the market. That's super, super important. Utilities like to listen to other utilities. So you always want to collaborate with the first utility in the new market, and then make it public and spread the word, and let other utilities follow.
Yeah, I guess as you say, it's always easy when you have a reference point or somebody who will champion or speak for validate what you're doing and the product. This world has grown so quickly. Again, going back to a little bit of in Hyperion's early days, we were working with Sonnen as they evolved sort of the Sonnen community and peer-to-peer trading very early on in batteries. I say very early on. It's probably still only like 5, 6, 7 years ago or something, but it feels like a long time. But again, now we have a world where there's much more renewables, both on utility scale and, of course, on residential and commercial properties. We also have now batteries beyond where they were, even just a few years ago. And of course, EV charging, is becoming much more a thing in pretty much most countries, certainly across Europe. So all these, I guess, moving parts. How does Exnaton sort of, I guess, sit across all of those and interact with all of those different both energy use cases, but also sort of generation sources?
Well, I mean, our foundation is being able to build DR assets. So that means we can build consumption based on different rates, whether it's a dynamic rate, a fixed rate, a time of use rate. So we're always working with a time series billing engine. So we don't consider annual consumption, but we consider a consumption point every 15 minutes. And this means over the course of a year, we bill 30,000 data points and not a single one. So the times that the friendly employee of your utility would knock on your door and read your meter rating, those times are over, right?
Yeah.
We now have smart meters, and now we want to create value from the smart meter data. We want to automate billing, and we want to learn from all the smart meter data. So we do the billing for consumption, but we also do all the billing for production. So whether it's a PV system, a local wind asset, all of that, we can bill as well. And at the end of the day, a battery is always behaving like a consumer or like a producer, because it is consuming electricity to store it, or it is releasing energy into the grid, and that is basically like a producer. So a battery is a prosumer in our case, and a battery will always have two lines on its invoice. One is for consumption and one for production. This is how we're doing all of that. That's the foundation. And then the next point is, well, now that you've handled all the billing, you want to create an actual benefit from all of that. So now we want to steer assets based on the current prices. We want to let the battery know when to consume electricity and when to release electricity into the local grid. This is why we need dynamic rates for, because this is basically the incentivation, because no battery, no electric vehicle would be willing to contribute, to participate in the new energy system if there wasn't a remuneration for that. That's why we need dynamic rates for storing electricity, for releasing electricity. And the foundation is the capability of billing all of that.
It's an interesting point. Further to that, again, going back to the internationalization piece, is obviously in different markets, different utilities have different regulation, particularly around time of use tariffs, for example. So how are you, I guess, able to operate in territories where there are differences there? And perhaps just following on from that in terms of policies and sort of tariff pricing, what do you see as some of the key things that will unlock more of what we're all looking to achieve, which is more of a renewable and more of a sort of a low carbon energy base?
Yeah, that's a very good question. I think one of the advantages that we have is that we went international from the second day on. So we had to build our system in a way that it would suit the Swiss market and the Austrian market, and then early on also the German market. So we were just very familiarized with different regulations, and we build our system in a modular way. So you can really imagine our software as this super flexible tariff editor. So imagine you have a dashboard and then you click together your rate. And I mean, an electricity rate always has different components, right? So you pay for the electricity, so for generating it, you pay for the grid, for transporting it, and then you have all the levies and fees and so on. So those components you click together per drop, per click and drop in our tariff editor, and then you give it a certain rate. So now you can say, okay, grid fees is a fixed price of, let's say, 10 cents per kilowatt hours. On top of that, we have the fee for the electricity, for the generation part. Here we take a market rate from Apex, for example. We multiply it by 1.2 and we give it a fixed margin of 2 cents per kilowatt hour. All of that is doable with our tariff editor. So then you click together your very individual rate, and with this approach, we can work under different regulations. It doesn't matter whether it's Germany, whether it's Switzerland, because the idea of different components is the same in all the countries. And this is how we can adapt to the national regulations.
Okay. Okay. I want to jump back a little bit because it still fascinates, and in terms of you going into as a startup with a PhD student, no real working experience or sales experience as such, and I believe that you've been sort of the lead on the business development and the sort of commercial side of the business. So knocking on those first utility doors, even though you have this project behind you, it's still tough. And how have you evolved personally, and how much have you learned from a business perspective more than an energy or technology perspective in the last few years?
Yeah, I think I've learned quite a bit. No, it's been a very, very insightful journey. Of course, starting a startup is a roller coaster. You don't always have good days. You also have a few bad days. I mean, beforehand, I have supported companies as a freelancer in marketing and sales. I have worked in a startup beforehand in marketing and sales. So I do have first experience, but of course it's a different thing if you go out there with an established company trying to sell something, trying to make products more known, or if you're in a startup that is newly founded. I think for us, the reputation of the research project has helped us a lot, because back then when we started off, everyone in Switzerland basically knew that one research project because it was all over the media. So this was definitely a kickstart for us. Also coming from a very renowned technical university was definitely an advantage for us here in Switzerland. I mean, everyone knows ETH Zurich. So this was the door opener to first conversations with utilities in Switzerland, but that doesn't mean that those conversations led to active signings, you know. It was a bit of a tougher journey to get those utilities under contract. And one thing we also had to learn is that as soon as a utility confirms your offer, we then had to learn what it takes to bring those deals through procurement. This was
Yeah.
another 2 or 3 months of work until we could actually start off with the projects. So it was quite a journey, but you learn with every step. And I mean, today we know quite well which questions to ask to our customers in advance. How are we getting this through procurement? How should we deal um, with the pricing structure? What kind of incentives do your procurement team members have, and so on? So I think we have learned along the way tremendously. I personally have learned a lot, and it's been quite a ride.
Yeah, I'm sure it has. I'm sure it has. We'll explore that more. Again, go back to the utilities. As we said at the beginning, they're quite sort of slow at innovation, at sort of change. But primarily, clearly, what they're interested in is maintaining or acquiring customers and selling power. Essentially, is where they're making their profits. So, how have they seen where you can enable that to grow from their perspective? Because, like we said before, it's that incentivization to for consumers to act differently in a way that's more, again, greener and or efficient. But again, I'm just wondering how you were able to tell the story or help the utilities to see how they could benefit through this ability to interact better with their consumers, with their customer base.
Yeah, yeah. I mean, one thing that we should take into account is the competition out there on the market. In the European markets, you have new utilities in every market. Those utilities, they come into the market, they are super digitized, they have super modern electricity products, and they are really attracting considerable market shares out there. And even if a market share might be still small, they make a lot of buzz out there. They have huge marketing budgets, and they are really rethinking electricity and its products. So if you have a look at Octopus Energy, for example, 1,5, Enpal, Tibber, all of these players, they have made it possible to excite electricity consumers for electricity, you know? So this is basically their achievement. They have made electricity a desired product. And traditional players do see this, and traditional utilities, they do want to keep up with that,
Yeah, yeah.
but they don't know how to do it. And I mean, a traditional utility, but what are they good at? They are good at trading electricity, right? This is their core competency. They are good at maintaining the grid, building the grid, all of that. But they do not necessarily have the software capabilities in-house and this whole like user experience perspective, because in their systems, an end user is a measurement point, a grid connection. And we are taking them on the journey to deliver great products to their end users. And our value proposition is like launch similar products like Octopus, like 1,5, and really build on the trust you have gained from your customers over the past decades, because those players have been around. Whereas the new utilities, the so-called neo utilities, they have the challenge of being trusted, being the trusted local partner, right? But those traditional players, they have been trusted for decades. So
Mm.
they can use this trust now, launch great modern products. And we do think the synergies between modernized products and the trusted aspect is the best possible fit out there.
Yeah, that's really interesting, actually, because again, there's still lots of statistics, even though there are now options to change quite easily in the UK and I'm sure across Europe as well. People still, many, if not the majority, still stick with those they've been with for years or even decades in some examples. But I get that. I mean, I had Greg from CEO from Octopus and also know Philip Schroeder very well from 1,5, both in on the podcast, which is cool. But again, that kind of innovation and disruption that's kind of, again, utilities actually have to buy into this, otherwise they start to fall into obsolescence, right? So it's these things are all changing and they need to go through this innovation journey. And I guess it's historically obvious that they can do that through a third party much easier than they can do that internally.
Yes, exactly, exactly. And so the question is, how are you doing it? So if a utility today wants to launch a new product, they make up their ideas, they make up their concept and so on. And I've heard so many times from utilities that they have the greatest ideas and the greatest concepts for new products, but they failed at getting those products on the customer invoice because it was just too cumbersome with the existing ERP systems out there. Because a large ERP system does not adapt to a pilot for utility, so it's really tough to get your ideas on the roadmaps of the big ERPs.
Yeah.
And this is where we come in. We really have the super flexible platform. We integrate with existing ERP systems, and we outsource the complexity into our time series billing engine. And we do this within a couple of weeks and not months or
Months.
years,
Yeah.
So this is really our value proposition. With us, you can launch a new raid within 6 to 12 weeks, depending on the complexity.
Yeah. Interesting. So going back to again to your journey as you evolve, selling now into more territories, more utilities. The markets are changing, of course, in terms of both technical capabilities. AI is obviously going to play a big part in things. There's a lot of change. So there's no longer three of you in the company, right? So talk me a little bit about the journey of how you've personally dealt with growing, teams to take on a lot of this work, growing, I guess internationally with resources. So part of that scale up journey is really tough, I think, for an entrepreneur. As you say, you're juggling so many plates at any given time. But ultimately, none of this will happen if you don't have the right people on board doing the right things. So perhaps share a little bit of how you've evolved the team and the culture of the business over the last few years.
Yeah, sure, sure. I do think until now, our company was on 3 stages. So the first stage is this founding stage where we transformed um, our research finding into a startup idea. Back then, it was all around the business case, how to get started, who's in the founding team, who is doing what in the founding team, how do you even found a company, all of that was the first stage. Then we have the second stage, which I consider the startup stage. This is the stage when you have to really go out there to the market to attract first customers. But, I mean, in order to attract the first customer, you need a product.
Yeah.
And in order to have a product, you need a team that builds it. And in order to have a team, you need money for that. And the money is typically coming from venture capital. And what does a venture capital fund want to see in order to believe in you? Customers. So it really is this
Yeah.
spinning wheel, and you have to adjust all the different wheels, and you have to make sure you're progressing on every wheel in order to get the whole machine
Mm.
running. So that's what I consider the startup stage. I mean, we were lucky because we brought our first customer from the research project in, and then we had a couple of Austrian customers right away. So we were lucky in that sense that we had early market interest. And then after in the startup stage, you employ the first people. So it's all about, how can I convince someone to work for me? How can I convince someone to leave their previous jobs in order to work for that newly found startup? So it's a lot about convincing people, building trust, and creating a desirable workplace for the people. So this was the second stage. And then the third stage, which we're in right now, is the scale up phase. So adding more and more customers onto our platform, standardization in contracts, in processes, all of that. So now we're really thinking in who's responsible for what. We're not in the stage of the company any longer where everyone can know everything, and not all people can sit together at one table any longer, but you really have to think in teams. You have to think in interfaces between the teams. How does marketing know of all the product updates? When should we involve sales? When should we involve the engineers and so on? So now we're really entering the stage where the company gets a bit more organized and better structured. It's an exciting stage. It's also it takes lot of diligence right now to
Yeah.
set all of this up, because it is a change in the structure, and you again have to motivate people to follow the new structure. I mean, most of the people were working quite autonomously in the past years, and now there is some new processes that they have adhered to. But it's also a very interesting phase right now.
Yeah, no, it's fascinating. Again, that's part obviously that we play and we love to go through that scaling phase and how you adapt cultures, how you bring people in and don't disturb the culture that you've built. But it's like you said, it's a very different thing for people to work in companies as they're 10 people or 100 people or 1,000 people is a very different environment. And from a leadership
Yeah,
perspective as well,
definitely.
that's really different. Yeah.
Definitely. One thing I would like to mention about our culture is, so we're a remote first team. So we do have our headquarters in Zurich, Switzerland, but we have people all over Europe. And back in the days, in the early days, I mean, we started off during COVID. I mean, we hired people without having known them in person beforehand, simply because we could not meet those people.
Yeah, yeah.
Borders were closed, so there was no way in meeting those people. And I remember back in the days, our investors have told us, you cannot hire someone without having met them. But I mean, COVID has changed this, and we then started off in different locations. And very early on, our CTO went on a conference, which was a virtual conference, obviously, and they had a tool for collaboration. And we then introduced this virtual office tool into our company. And until today, we're really using it. So you can really imagine it to be like a little computer game. You have your avatar, there's an office space, there's whiteboards, there's meeting rooms, there's desks. And we've been using this until today. And this is part of our culture. And this way, I really don't have the feeling that employees that are representing us from Barcelona or the UK or wherever are so much in a different location, because we're all into that virtual office. We all see each other walking around. We know that when we leave the office and it's a little bit late, let's say 7 p.m., and you still see someone there, then you drop by and you're asking them, hey, what are you still doing here? And so on. So
Okay.
this really is part of our culture.
Yeah, no, that's really cool because it is difficult. Hybrid and remote, even more so remote teams, they can be fantastic, and there's lots of benefits to them. But it can be a real challenge to keep that culture, as you say, to keep everybody aligned and feeling involved and not
Definitely.
alone. So it's great that you've
Definitely.
found
Yeah.
tools to do that. Um, Looking a little bit, it's always difficult to look in a crystal ball in our world because everything changes from obviously from policy and geopolitics and all the other things that are happening over the sea, over the pond at the moment, or the sky. There's lots of moving parts, but I'd love just to get a feel for you because you must look at what's coming down the line, both from a technology point of view. I mean, everyone's talking AI. I don't particularly need to go down that path, but I'm happy to hear about that because it does
Yeah.
play a part and will play a part in all of our lives and in this work, in the energy system in particular. But just looking a little bit at how you see the energy system changing or evolving over the next 5 years, which is quite a long time in how things evolve. And with as we said before, you've got DRs, you've got mobility, you've got batteries, you've got lots of things happening. So maybe just a little bit of a look into the crystal ball of what you would like to see or what perhaps you do see coming in the next few years.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, from our perspective, billing is achieved. Or let's say we now have solutions for billing all of the fine granular data. And the next step is definitely optimization. We really want to integrate the DER assets smoothly into the market. And I mean, we're seeing first electric vehicles that support bidirectional charging. So we need rates for bidirectional charging. We're seeing more and more battery storage systems being deployed all over Europe because the technology is getting cheaper and cheaper every day. So now it really is about integrating all of those assets in an intelligent way. And this is where AI will be kicking in. So we need agents that control all of the assets, that tell the asset when to store electricity, when to release electricity, at what times it is best to do all of that, because it creates most revenues for the battery, because at the end of the day, you want to amortize your hardware. So we really believe in dynamic incentives to steer all of the assets. And we do think that we have the technical capabilities of providing that brain for the flexibility. And you want to bring the flexibility to the market. You want either the grid operators to buy the flexibility, or the utility to buy the flexibility, or other players. Whoever is offering most for the flexibility in a certain moment should be getting the flexibility, and the owners of the flexibility should be remunerated best. But that is our whole vision around dynamic pricing signals. We really want to pave the way into accessing flexibilities and make investments in renewable energy attractive.
Yeah. What really fascinates you, touched on it there, is this, I should say, starting to get the bidirectional charging both in the vehicles and obviously from a grid perspective as well. And we already enjoy obviously a charge overnight, and sometimes it's free, and sometimes you get paid to take charge the car.
Exactly, you get paid for
It's cool, right?
consuming. Yeah.
But again, now the next evolution of that is this, it's not going to happen maybe this year, but it's not too far, I think, before most vehicles will have bidirectional charging, infrastructure. So this is a fascinating to see how that level of aggregation and flexibility will play its part in the growth of the grid.
Yeah, definitely. But one thing I would also like to mention, I mean, in order for having all those assets out there, we need to create great user experiences in the energy sector. We need to access the capital of the end users. Many households do have necessary investment free for PV panels, for battery storage systems, but they need to know how fast those hardware assets will be amortized, where to get them, how much electricity they are producing, how much electricity they are consuming, all of that. So with this whole transformation from being an passive consumer to being an active prosumer, flexumer, or however you want to call them, their needs are changing drastically. They want to get insights. And you have to provide those insights on different levels, on a high level and on very fine granular level for those that are really interested in the information. But this, providing all of that, again, accesses financial power and investments into the sector. And the better we are at creating all of the positive user experience around the assets, the more assets we will see and the more flexibility we have in our system. And then on a long term, the less we need to extend our physical infrastructure. So we really want to think through the whole chain and optimize all bits of it so that we as a society are successful in making the switch to renewables. But it requires a lot of digitalization.
It does. Digitalization, visualization, information. These are the things which obviously help, I should say, prosumers to make those choices, be they commercial or residential. Cool. We could talk forever. It's been great to get some insights into how you see that world and how you've grown the business in such a short period of time. And it's been fascinating to hear and to share some of your thoughts. We'll make sure on the episode page that we share links to Exnaton and to yourself, and to so people can find out some more. And for now, it's been great to share that story, and really looking forward to see how you evolve and the market evolves over the coming years.
Thank you, David. Thanks for the invitation. It was great to be here.